The Josh. That's better. Now everyone's awake. Welcome, General Saab. Welcome to Times Now's India Economic Conclave. Here we're talking about transforming the army, and you have some plans. We just saw the AV, very inspiring. But let's talk in specifics. Now, it is said that no superpower can become one if it doesn't have a robust fighting arm. Though India has a pacifist outlook and we've maintained that outlook, there are expansionist neighbors around us. So what is the roadmap to transform the army into a future-ready, technology-driven, lethal force?
Right. Thank you, Rahul, for inviting me to be here at the conclave. And let me straight come to the point. And you mentioned about the transformation. And to be able to transform into a future-ready force, we have taken a number of initiatives. The basic drivers for this change of this transformation are, I would say, fourfold. First was the unprecedented changes in the geopolitical landscape. Second was the changing character of war, as we have witnessed in some of the ongoing conflicts the world over. Third is the limitless potential of technology that we again saw, and I think the speaker spoke about it. And the fourth is the socio-economic changes. So these are essentially the four drivers for change. And the aim of these transformation initiatives that we are taking is essentially to enhance our operational effectiveness and efficiency in all the three domains, that is the operational domain, the administration, as well as functional efficiency. And we've identified 5 major pillars or foundations for transformation. And briefly, I'll explain them. The first is, of course, force restructuring and organization, because we believe to be able to remain current and to be able to be future ready, we need to constantly evolve, look at our organization, carry out restructuring where required, so that some of these organization establishment units which are less relevant are no longer relevant. We can sort of modify them or perhaps do away with them. So that is the first one. Second is modernization and infusion of technology, because that we feel is critical, and I think in the introductory remarks this was adequately highlighted. Third is the human resource management, the way we deal with our human resource, because that is key, and that is where I think the new scheme of recruitment and human resource management, Agnipath, of which perhaps we can talk a little later. The fourth is modifying our processes, systems, and functions. And this is something which we can do within our organization. Again, the aim being to enhance operational, administrative, and functional efficiency. And the last, and also as important, is this aspect of jointness and integration, because we believe that all the three services, unless we put our entire effort potential together, in fact, that is what is required to be again able to meet our future challenges more effectively. Now, for all these 5 pillars of transformation or areas, we have laid down definite roadmap with clearly identifiable objectives. We have laid down the responsibilities, and in fact, this year, that is 2023, we have declared as the year of transformation. While I understand that this cannot happen in a year, but this is going to be our focus for this year. So this largely is our roadmap to transform our Indian Army into a agile, future-ready, modern force, able to meet our security challenges in the future more effectively.
Well, you said recently, and let me quote you, today the nation is at the cusp of transformational change. We are witness to the growing stature of our country in the international environment and higher expectations from the world community. Due to our legacy issues of unsettled borders and related security challenges, possession of strategic deterrence instruments in our case is essential, unquote. What's the strategic deterrence here that you're referring to?
I think this statement I made a couple of days back in the context of our acquiring certain new weapon systems, and this was, I think, I was referring to the BrahMos. So in terms of our war-fighting ability, there are two aspects. We must have adequate deterrence capability. And when I say deterrence capability, is not only, I am not alluding to what the army possesses, but again across the three services, so that then you are able to deter any conflict for the future. And should that deterrence not work, then you should be able to have these elements so that you can then prosecute war or prosecute conflict in an effective manner. So these are the deterrence elements that I was referring to. Now what exactly constitutes deterrence? Maybe it will take a long time to describe this, but this is what we are aiming as far as our defense forces are concerned.
Well, former Defense Minister Manoj Pande had perhaps tried to start the debate on that, on what you're saying, what constitutes deterrence. And he had talked about the possible review of the no-use first policy, the nuclear policy. Is that up for review at any time?
Well, as far as this aspect is concerned, I think we leave it here because this is something which I believe is in a more sort of classified domain. So I would not want to comment on this aspect.
But do you think a debate is relevant in our times on this issue?
Well, this debate, and I think there are writers and other academia who have expressed their views. So I'm sure the right people are taking note of it and looking at this aspect.
The External Affairs Minister said that India is facing, and I quote, a very complicated challenge from China. Tell us how the Army has upgraded its capacities and capabilities along the LOC across the sector. How fast have things improved? Just today I was going through the media website, and they're talking about visual evidence of China upgrading some of its military infrastructure very close to our LAC. So how are we responding?
Right. So I would say that any army, for that matter, continuous upgradation of its war-fighting ability, capabilities, as well as infrastructure, I would say is an ongoing pursuit. And I think in the same light, our northern adversary is undertaking this infrastructure development, modernization, just as we are doing. But what I want to highlight here is while the infrastructure development across our LAC gets highlighted or gets spoken of, we at times tend to either overlook or miss out the kind of infrastructure development that has happened on our own side, be it in terms of constructing new roads in difficult areas, tunnels, bridges across certain important rivers, including strategic bridges. For that matter, airfields, advanced landing grounds, helipads, habitat in the forward areas, storage of ammunition, armament, enhancement of communication infrastructure, power infrastructure. So all this is what is, in fact, happening on our side as well. You asked about what is our level of preparedness. I must say that our deployment along the line of actual control is robust. We have adequate reserves to deal with any contingency. And while this is happening, we have paid attention to our capability development and endeavor in terms of inducting new technology, new warfighting systems along the LAC. So I wish to reassure, and through your medium, that our op preparedness levels is of a very high standard, and so is the morale of our soldiers who are deployed on ground.
General Pande, just a quick counter question, picking up from the phrase you used that people tend to forget what we are doing on our side. Why do you think that is the issue, recurring issue? People seem to be blind to what is happening on our side of the border, the developments. Is this a failure on part of the army to communicate what it's doing? Or do you think you're the victim of a deep cynicism?
No, but I must in the same vein or in the same breath also mention that the awareness among the common people as to what is happening along the borders has increased manifold. And thanks to people like you, your representatives who visit forward areas, are covering areas, what is happening, how our soldiers live, what kind of upgradation of infrastructure has taking place. So I would say the awareness amongst common masses about the forward areas is much more than what it used to be perhaps a few years back.
General Saab, one of the challenges referred to by EM Dr. Jaishankar was about escalation at our border, obviously, of the kind perhaps we witnessed in Galwan 3 years ago. Could that happen again?
See, like any military, we have to be prepared for all contingencies. So ours is to be ready at all times, have adequate force levels, have adequate reserves to deal with any contingencies. And to deal with any such contingencies, we have our plans, we practice them, we rehearse them, and that is what I would like to perhaps state in response.
Well, we just had another round of talks. The Chinese or the PLA leadership, whichever way you want to sort of phrase it, don't seem to be in a hurry to de-escalate. Why do you think this is the case?
Now, what I believe is, unless you talk, unless you engage, both sides engage, talk to each other, I think that is the only way you will find resolution to ongoing issues. I think we need to be patient. We need to not rush up things. And whatever dialogue, whatever talks that have happened so far, I believe we've had, satisfying results. So I'm sure for the balance issues which are still remaining unresolved, this ongoing process of talks at the diplomatic and the military level must continue for us to find resolution to the balance.
But patience comes with a cost also. The more you deploy, resources are utilized. So I'm sure the endeavor must be to hasten the de-escalation process. It's been going on now for about 3 years. Could it have been faster, General Saab?
Well, like I mentioned, it's a process, right? And in any talk, in any resolution, any dialogue, there are two sides. So, you need to come to a common ground. And if it takes a little longer, as long as the solutions that we have are to our advantage or are mutually acceptable, I think that is what we need to look at, and that is what the attempt is.
So I'm going to try and headline hunt here, and I'm going to try and tweeze this out of you. Do you think the Chinese have been unusually reticent in meeting some of our expectations?
Well, again, I'll repeat the same point which I've made. If let us say two of us have any differences, unless you talk, how are you going to resolve these differences? So perhaps, I know it's a process, and unless at some point we'll come to a situation where that answer or solution is acceptable to both. I think that is what the attempt is, and this attempt must continue.
Well, like a good armyman, he's dug himself into a trench, and he's not going to allow the line to move. Wonderful. Let me ask you, because it's important. Some news reports revealed that the PLA has demanded the creation of an enlarged buffer zone of 15 to 20 kilometers in the Depsang Plains, presently under India's control. This is in addition to the 18-20 kilometers of territory from Y Junction, oblique bottleneck, to patrolling points 10, 11, 11A, 12 and 13, the access to which has been physically denied, as per reports, by the PLA since May 2020. Can you confirm this, General Saab?
Well, I would not wish to get into the specifics because, the boundary problem or the boundary situation or the boundary issue in itself is complex. So it will not be fair for me to comment on what you just mentioned. But I only wish to say that during the talks, through the medium of talks, our attempt, and I think we have succeeded in coming to a solution which is mutually acceptable, and which is not disadvantageous to us.
So can I take the liberty of saying that you don't deny this?
No, I mentioned what I just mentioned, so, you know.
Okay, talking about border states, let's discuss Manipur. You were there recently, sir. What's the update from the ground? When can we expect normalcy? The Home Minister was there yesterday and there was an incident. Clearly, it's taking some time to establish a trust and be peace. What is your assessment?
Right, so over the last 4 or 5 days, I think we have had sporadic incidents of violence, firing from both sides. And if you recall, after the initial 2 to 3 days, that is between 3rd to 5th, where the violence levels were maximum, between 6th to 25th, things were sort of, the violence levels are reduced, but then you saw a sudden spurt in violence. And some of the things which are currently happening in Manipur, from the reports I get, is the involvement of people who are blocking the security forces when you go on our columns, when you want to get deployed or you want to move in response to a situation. Between the two communities, there have been incidents of firing. The weapons which have been, the weapons which have gone out of the establishment, now these weapons are available to people, and this is where even some of the village defense forces or village defense committees, they are in possession of these arms. We have had some cases of mass protest, gatherings, so this is something which we have requested we must try and avoid, because that is where the spark can ignite. And as far as our work there is concerned, we are dominating especially those areas where both the communities are living together, so that you have a physical separation and you prevent a direct physical contact between both sides. Besides, we are also helping in keeping the two main roads which lead into Manipur, NH37 and NH2, entirely open, that the flow of essential commodities continues.
Well, it can never be helpful if people at large are militarized. You said that these weapons were looted. How do you get them back, General Saab?
So we are following a two-pronged approach. One is there's an appeal which has been made. I heard that when the Honorable Home Minister appealed to people to return the weapons by a certain time frame.
Yeah.
And second is we are also carrying out combing operations based on specific areas, so that these weapons which are presently at large, you get them back. So that is the R.
So are you saying that some amount of force is going to be applied if people are not going to adhere to the appeal that has been put out, and they continue to hold on to their weapons? You said combing operations. Will that entail
yes,
perhaps
so
confrontation?
So those elements who are not supposed to be in possession of those weapons if
will
required,
be dealt with harshly, because
yes,
that's what the Union Home Minister has said.
Absolutely. So it has to be a mix of both. If people, if people who are not supposed to have weapons, if they're having weapons and then using this to create unpleasant situations and such as this, if required, the force will be used.
Well, that's a big statement coming from the Army Chief. Now, I just want to ask you, because you say that these people, so the State Chief Minister, Mr. N. Biren Singh, had blamed the violence on Kuki insurgent groups. Remember, he had said this recently. On May 28th, a tweet by Spear Corps Indian Army revealed intercepts of transcripts of plans by insurgents to use human shields while attacking villages and security forces. But the CDS has said that insurgency has nothing to do with the Manipur violence. Now, why is there so much confusion about who these individuals are? You've been there. What is your assessment as to who is to blame? Are they insurgents or are they not insurgents?
You know, I would mention here, and I would like to state that the current situation that we are confronting within Manipur is that of ethnic clashes between two communities. Now, why what is the history of it is a very detailed issue which we don't have time to discuss. And the current situation is a manifestation of law and order. So as far as the military deployment is concerned, it is to assist the state administration in restoring law and order, restoring peace, restoring normalcy. So that is what we are very clear in our mind as to what our role is. As far as you mentioned of some incidents, so there is also this challenge of misinformation, of narratives which are coming out from both sides. Now that is another, we had close to 21,000 people there who took shelter in our operating bases, in our army as well as Assam Rifle, post. And this, we looked after their administration, their well-being, rations, food, medical and what have you. So I would say our response to what happened, I would call it very prompt, very effective. And I think that was what was instrumental in largely bringing the situation under immediate control in the first couple of days. And your second question,
was AFSPA. In Manipur, AFSPA has been scaled down. Do you think a time has come to review that decision?
Well, when you look at the security situation, this is only one aspect, what currently is happening. But you'll have to look at certain other factors before we take a call. And I'm sure, if there is I've been looking at examining all these factors, conditions, including, there are a number of other issues. I'm sure at the right level, at the right time, this review, if necessitated, will be undertaken.
Well, given the fact that you're going to launch operations to recover weapons, you might want to actually look at the AFSPA, diversity and dissent, and we've seen that play out. How do you think that's going to influence the other border state, the sensitive one, or region, Kashmir?
Right, so like you mentioned, I think this violence that we have witnessed in the recent past is unprecedented, and it has actually further exacerbated the economic situation that our western neighbor it is in. As far as its impact on the situation along the line of control or in the hinterland, you would recall that we have understanding between both the DGMOs of February 21 with respect to ceasefire, and it is currently holding, and I think that is something which is good. As far as the infiltration levels are concerned, they have come down. There has been some focus of activities south of or in the southern region of Jammu and even the plains region of Punjab, actually. So that is something which we have taken note of. Otherwise, our readiness levels both on the LC as well as in the hinterland, I would say, is again of a very good order, and any attempt by the other side to re-strategize its strategy to deal with through the proxy tanzeems or proxy organizations, I think we are well prepared to deal with that kind of a situation.
Well, General Saab, spate of targeted killings has continued. Most recently, a member of a circus troupe, Deepu, was murdered in Anantnag. Why are they continuing?
I think my assessment is that there is an attempt by our Western adversary to give this a hue of a homegrown kind of an insurgency. Right? It is also to do with sensationalism and also to do with gaining visibility, because that is what makes news. And I think this is the attempt as to why targeting of certain selected community or selected, I would say, category of people is happening. But in the same breath, I would also mention that I think the number of incidents have come down significantly, and largely to the good synergy cooperation we have amongst all the security forces or agencies that are currently working in the state.
Well, last couple of questions, General Saab. We've seen planned attacks on army convoys on April 20th in Poonch, on a smaller scale, of course, than Pulwama, and thank God for that. 5 soldiers lost their lives. Was it a failure of intelligence?
Well, as far as the situation in this area that you refer to is concerned, I think that is a cause of concern. And I mentioned because of our success in the valley region, perhaps there is an attempt to activate this area, which we have taken note of. And we have undertaken a number of measures. One is, of course, some additional deployment or redeployment of forces. Second is to re-energize the intelligence network to have or improve the level of coordination with all the other agencies who are operating there. Also use technology and look at certain basic level drills, practices, tactics that we have. So this incident was an aberration, but I'm sure we will get back and, all the terrorists who are operating in this area, we shall be able to identify and neutralize in due course.
Because the opposition and the critics of the government say it was a security failure. A very quick response on that.
Well, I don't think that's a fair comment. In a counterinsurgency on this kind of a situation, there will be, it is for us to make sure that our drills, our procedures, our all other things that go into prosecuting a successful counter-terrorism operation is of a very high order. So I would not classify it as a security failure.
Last two questions. PAF, psyops, propaganda videos, are they a challenge? And also, is this PAF homegrown or PARC Special Operations Group? What is your assessment of this?
So you rightly pointed out, it is part of the information war or, propagating false narratives. And that is part of the overall strategy which our adversary would want to adopt to create sensationalism. And, but we have adequate means, adequate methods. And again, that is where I think the media, both the print, electronic and the social media, I would say have a responsible role to play. But we do have a strategy which we have put in place as to how to counter this part of the strategy.
My last question, Kashmir is moving towards normalcy. What would you put this down to?
I think it is a mix of number of factors. Initially, or to begin with, I think the efforts of the security forces to have brought down the violence levels to below the threshold. Simultaneously, it is the attempt or the initiatives of the state administration, the central government, to bring in number of other methods, in terms of economic investments, tourisms, and bringing in all these initiatives. I think it is mix of both, which is manifesting into what we see the improvement in overall situation as far as the state is concerned.
We've run out of time. Wish we could spend a little longer talking to you about some other issues that have obviously got overlooked. But General Saab, thank you very much for making the time. Thank you very much for being part of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, General Pande and Rahul, for that very enlightening conversation. Moving on to our next session this evening. Google, while launching its app engine